like I was saying, we started with the theory of supply last week, and we looked at the meaning of supply and went further to explain the supply schedule and the supply curve. We drew the supply curve. We talked about the law of supply, and we looked at instances where the law of supply would not hold. And that's where we stopped last week. So from there, we're going to continue this week, and we will continue, and we'll start with factors affecting supply. So let's look at the factors affecting supply. Here we have price. Of course, we already know what the law of supply says, which is the higher the price, the higher the quantity supply. So we have price. So at every point in time that, because we are dealing with suppliers, don't forget I told you last week that you should put yourself as suppliers and try as much as possible to disassociate yourself from being a consumer. But you are acting like a supplier. So of course, when prices are high, that automatically means there will be more profit. And so there's a tendency for you to supply more so that you can attain more profit. And that's essentially what happens with price. Now, we also have price of other commodities. Now, with price of other commodities, thinking as a supplier. Now, if the price of another commodity, for example, if we are looking at a substitute, if the price of a commodity that is a substitute for the producer now, not for the consumer, there is a substitute for the producer. If the price increases, if the price of one of the substitutes increases, then what will happen is that once the price increases, the producer will now shift to the production of the commodity whose price has increases. So that means that there will be a fall in the production of the substitute to that product. I take it again. Or better still, let's take examples. So can we take examples of, can we go to the chat box and think of something that a supplier, two commodities that a supplier supplies. Of course, we know that they are supplier now, not wholesalers, producers. They are companies that produces variety of products. You are not getting it. Milo and Bonvita are substitute products for consumers. They are not substitute products for suppliers. Okay, bread and cake is a good one. You're still not getting it. Some of you are still not getting it. And I want you to keep trying until you get it. Some of you are not getting it. Number one, it has to be two commodities. And number two, it will be two commodities that can be supplied by a producer, not commodities for a consumer. So when I see good examples, I'll tell you, okay, this is good. Golden penny spaghetti and golden penny indomie. Okay, so let's take that. Let's take okay, that's another one. Noodles and what does that person says by Dangote? Okay, let's see. Sugar and cement. Dangote does sugar and cement. Okay, we can take that as well. So let's take that as an example. Salt and sugar, it's even another one. That's Dangote. Those are good ones. Those products are produced by Dangote. We have sugar and we have salt. So what we are saying here is that if the price of sugar increases, then Dangote would decrease the production of salt so that it can catch in on the increase in the demand for sugar, in the price of sugar. And once the price of sugar increases, that means the production of sugar will increase. And this might affect the production of salt. That's essentially what we're saying. So thank you for those who understand what I'm saying. Okay, so we move on to another one, which is available technology. Of course, we know that the importance of technology is to increase production and to also make production more easier and also to reduce the cost per unit of the product. That's the essence of technology. Technology is better ways of doing something, a better way. And you do that, and you're using technology to achieve better quality, technology to increase output, technology to reduce cost per unit. So the more a country or the more a supplier embraces technology, you know, the more is able to supply because with technology is able to increase its production and at a reduced cost. So it's also able to make more profit. So if a company embraces technology, its production would increase. But if a company is still using more of local, more of manual, yes, that's a better word, more of manual rather than technology, then production will fall. Now, number four, we look at the cost of production. Cost of production is very, very vital in production because it's a total of all the expenses that are incurred in production. And of course, we know that if your cost of production increases, then it will definitely affect the quantity that you produce. If the cost of production increases, using the same amount of capital that you have available, then you would find out that you would have to reduce supply, you would have to reduce production. But if the cost of production reduces, then you'll be able to increase your production as well. Let's move on to the next one, which is taxation. Tax. Tax is a compulsory payment. It is mandatory that companies will pay tax. Yes, it is mandatory. Company pays tax on they pay company tax, they pay tax on profits, and they pay tax on goods and services. We have all forms of taxes that has to do with production. We have import duties, we have excise duties. All of these taxes affect the level of production. And in a place like Nigeria, you find businessmen and women always complaining that they pay multiple tax. So in a situation where companies pay multiple tax, in a situation where the level of tax is high, at any point in time, there's an increase in taxation, it is bound to reduce supply because on one end, it will discourage production. People who want to go into business, they might be hesitant. People who are already in business might desire to leave because if the cost of doing business is extremely very high, as a result of the high level of taxation, it will discourage people from going into productive activities, and that will ultimately reduce supply. So we also have natural disasters. Now, can you give me examples of natural disasters? We have natural disasters. Let's have example earthquake. Yes, everybody's talking about earthquake. Is it only earthquake that is flood? Yes, but mm, fire outbreak might not necessarily be natural. Hurricane, yes. Tsunami, yes, that's correct. Okay, so you already know what I'm talking about. So fire um, outbreaks. Thank you very much. Fire outbreaks, flood, like you have all mentioned, tsunami, all of this, drought will negatively affect production. It will affect the supply of goods and services. Once this happen, it has devastating effects because it will destroy. And so when that happens, you find out that production would reduce. But when we find out that natural disasters are not so many, that occurs, or in situations where there is even no natural disaster, then you find that production increases because they're able to harvest, they're able to produce, they're able to go to work, and then production increases. But when it does happen, natural disasters, you find out that it drastically reduces production. Then we have weather and climate conditions. Okay, sometimes weather is favorable, sometimes weather is not favorable. For example, during the hot season, people get tired easily. When they walk, they sweat, they are dehydrated, as against when weather is cool, and then people can work for longer hours. So weather also is a contributing factor to production. And there are also and climate conditions. And sometimes we also have situations where we have longer nights, shorter days. So that also means that it will also affect what's it called production. So you find out that especially when we also look at agricultural products, you also find out that weather and climate conditions, it's also valid because in areas where farmlands, you know, and the weather is conducive for planting, like I give you an example, during hot season, planting becomes very strenuous as against when the weather is cold. So it affects um, production. Then harsh weather sometimes as well, and harsh climatic conditions might have effect on things that have been planted in terms of the ability to grow and germinate. Harsh weather, when there is too little rainfall, it has a negative effect. When there is too much rainfall as well, it will also have negative effect on um, things that have been planted or anything agriculture, even on animals, even on fish, the fish in the water, it will definitely have an effect on them. And then we move on to the next one, which is government policy. Now, government policy can encourage production and supply, and government policy can also um, discourage production. Okay, somebody's already given an example, which is a very good one, and that is subsidy. If government subsidizes, in one form or the other, then it will encourage production. Okay, somebody else is also talking about privatization, which is also a very good one. Most public organizations most times are not efficient and effective. Their delivery is always very poor. But when government now um, privatizes those companies or commercializes them, then you find out that they're able to effectively offer such services as are required. Yes, I can see the answers coming in. Thank you very much. Quota system. Yes, that's another one. That's part of government policy. Government can decide to ban. So government can decide to regulate, some production of some products for one reason or the other. When of course you realize that that can happen. For example, when we look at the subsidy at a point in time, government stopped the importation of rice. It happened, and then it closed all our borders in terms of rice. And then later, when it opened for rice, government policy was to encourage farmers in Nigeria to be able to produce rice as well. And government, and because of that, government policy blocked our borders. And so many producers went into the production of rice. So you can see that government policy has a huge effect on production. On production, it can also, yes, that's another one coming in. Government can give subsidies to farmers in terms of machinery, maybe reduce import duties on machines that are imported, give them fertilizers at reduced prices, or even for free. And all this would affect production in the economy. And then finally, we have number of producers. The more producers we have, the more there will be an increase in the quantity that is supplied, because there's more of them supplying that commodity. The less producers we have, the less the supply, which is why it's not very encouraging when you have people in your country moving out to other countries to establish businesses and they're not doing it in your country. That implies that we would be reducing the number of producers that we have. And to have access to these commodities, we definitely have to be importing them, which will not give us a very good position. It will not give us a balance of payment position. So we find that the numbers of producers also affect supply. If we have many of them, then there will be an increase in production. And if we have less, there will be a reduction in production. So now we move to change in quantity supplied. Now we want to look at change in quantity supplied. We've done this with demand, so we won't take so much time with this. And we know that from our knowledge of demand, the change in quantity supplied can only be effective when there is a change in price. And that is the only thing that can bring about a change in quantity supplied, once there is a change in price. So if we look at that graph, which shows us the quantity that is supplied at varying prices, and with that, we have been able to construct a supply curve which is sloping from left to right upwards, showing us that increases in price will bring about increases in supply, and decreases in price will bring about decrease in supply. The price is represented on the vertical axis, and quantity is represented on the horizontal axis. And so if we take different points, for example, let's start with point B. At point B, we have 1.60, at the price of 1.60 per gallon, 640 million gallons of, let's assume it is palm oil, although it's gasoline, but let's use palm oil. Palm oil is sold, is supplied into the market. But we find out that if the price falls, note that we are looking at price. If price falls from point B to point A, if price falls to $1.2 per gallon, then that fall in price would make quantity to fall from 640 to 550. And that is our point A. So the fall in price has brought about a fall in supply. Peradventure, there is an increase in price from 1.60 dollars per gallon to $2 per gallon. It will bring an increase in supply from 640 million gallons to 700 million gallons, and that is reflected at point C. So we find out that what brings about an increase in supply from point B to C, or a reduction in supply from point B to A, is price. Is price. And that explains the change in quantity supplied. Now, let's go to shifts in the supply curve. Now, a shift in supply curve will come about that should be a change in supply. You're going to have to change that. You can see it on the screen. It's not a change in demand, a change in supply. Okay, so we'll now look at a shift in the supply curve. Okay, somebody is asking to see that's it. I'll give you a minute to just see it. That's it. And then I'm moving on to the next slide. Okay. Okay. So shift in the supply curve. Now you would see that, in fact, I'm going back there. You will see that for this, it's movement along the supply curve. So movement along. Is either movement upwards or movement downwards. The change is a movement along the supply curve. Now, but the shift is a movement to the right or to the left. So that means that the supply curve will shift either outwards or inwards. And so that means that the change in what caused the shift are the other factors apart from price that can affect supply. So let's go back to, I don't even need to go back to that. I hope you've been taking notes. So we have all those other factors that can bring about a change in supply except price. So we can take any one of these factors and use it as an example. Okay, Esther is telling us to use cost of production. So let's use cost of production. Let's use cost of production. So here we are looking at a supply curve. So there are three supply curves there. We have supply curve SS, supply curve S1, S1, and supply curve S2, S2. So of course we start with the supply curve S. That's the main supply curve. So we have a supply curve sloping upwards. That's the supply curve. But let's assume that for one reason or the other, there's an increase in the cost of production. If there's an increase in the cost of production, of course, we know that that will bring about a fall in supply. Because it is a fall in supply, the supply curve is going to shift from SS to S2, S2. That is a fall in supply. You can see from that graph that SS means that the quantity supplied is 5 million. That's quantity supplied in millions, is 5 million. When the price was $3,000, 5 million was supplied. That is at supply curve S. Now that the cost of production has increased, the quantity supplied has reduced to 4 million. You can see that from the graph if you trace it. The price is 3,000, showing that price is constant, but the quantity supplied is now 4 million. And so our new supply curve is S2, S2. That means supply has shifted, the supply curve has shifted from SS to S2, S2. Now, assuming there was a fall in the cost of production, if there was a fall in the cost of production, it will lead to an increase in supply, and the supply curve will shift outwards. It will shift outwards, and that's represented by S1, S1. And you can see that at S1, S1, the price of the price at that point in time, the cost of production is still $3,000, but then you can see that the price is still $3,000, but supply has increased to 6 million. So the supply curve has shifted outwards, representing an increase. So that's how you differentiate between change in quantity supplied and shifts in the supply curve. The change in quantity supplied is just a movement along the same supply curve, and the shift in supply curve represents either an outward shift or or an inward shift of the supply curve. So let's move on to types of supply. Types of supply. Now we have the joint or complementary supply. Joint or complementary supply. So here we are saying that when goods and services are produced and supplied from the same source, when they are produced and supplied from the same source. So in other words, what we are saying is that they are coming out from the same source. from the same source. The foundation is the same. But the products coming out of it will be different. Of course, will be different. So we say that who is that? Who is that before I send that person out? So when you're producing one commodity, it will result in the production of another commodity. So these two commodities, or more than these two commodities, are actually supplied from the same source. And I've given you an example where I said crude oil. Crude oil is a source. And from crude oil, you can get a variety of products. You can get petrol, you can get diesel, you can get kerosene. So you're going to give me examples now. You will give me example of the source, and then you tell me what can be gotten from it. Okay, somebody is saying cocoa, you can get milk, you can get Bonvita. Yes, flour, you can get bread and cake. Yes, that's possible. You must give me the source and give me what you can get from it. I don't like, some people are not following what I'm asking from you. Give me the source and give me the products as well. Products, not one product. Products, products, products. Yes, cassava. You can get gari, fufu, and okay, whatever. Timber, you can get chair, you can get book, you can get table. That's good. Wood, charcoal, yes. So the answers are coming in. Very good. So let's go to the second one, which is competitive supply. Competitive supply. This happens when products are supplied for the satisfaction of a particular want. Products are supplied in order to satisfy a desire. That means that, of course, normally in most cases anyway, when you have various sources that can supply, various products that can supply a particular one, then they are in competition with each other because they can satisfy the same ones. The consumer would have to choose from each one of them. But there are many sources, there's many products, there are many suppliers who can supply the product that can satisfy that particular want. So that means that they are in competition with each other because um, um, the competition means that when you supply one, it reduces the supply of the other. Let's take an example so that you can understand what I'm saying. For example, a piece of land. If the desire is to possess a piece of land for farming, I'm just giving an example, a piece of land. So, as a farmer on a piece of land, which is a desire that you want to meet, and so you become a producer, you want to enter into business of farming, then you are left with various options. It's either you want to plant rice or you want to plant cassava. So that means rice and cassava are in competition with each other. You know, that's the essence of it. Once you go into the production of rice, you might not be able to go into the production of cassava. So that's why we say supplying one reduces the supply of the other. Or peradventure you still decide to do cassava on the sideline, you will still not be able to supply cassava. One will be your main product. You supply more of that and less of the other. Now let me also give you another one that would also explain that. Let's assume that you want to travel to Port Harcourt, which is your desire, which is your want, getting yourself to Port Harcourt. You can get to Port Harcourt by air, you can get to Port Harcourt by road, and you can get to Port Harcourt by sea. The implication of this is that you choose one, once you choose one, that means that you have essentially reduced. Who is this? Okay, so that means that once you choose one, then you are indirectly reducing the supply, or you are indirectly reducing um, the supply of the other, because that means that, let's assume what I'm saying, if if majority starts traveling by road, then that means that those who travel by sea would definitely reduce, and that automatically means that those who use the ship or the water or the canoe that you use to travel by sea, those in that business would definitely have to leave that business because it will no longer be profit worthy. You understand? Or new people will not come in because they will see that it's not profit worthy. That's the essence. That's why we say it's in competition with each other. If more people travel by air, then that also automatically means that people will prefer to go into the hair business rather than go into the bus business, buying of buses, because they will toe the line or wherever it is that there is a greater supply. So we say they're in competition with each other. So can you now give me examples? So what you do is you give me the wants, and then you tell me the various ways by which it can be supplied. Okay, keke or danfo. Okay, in fact, keke, danfo, I think Okada too should be there. And that is if you want to go to a destination. Okay, that's another one. Smartwatch as against smartphones. Okay, what will be that want? That want is having a smart equipment. Okay, let's see. Writing in class, Bible or pencil. Writing in class, Bible or pencil. Mm, 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 mm. I would rather prefer, rather than the Bible or pencil, I would prefer black Bible and blue Bible. Okay, production, capital, and labor intensive. Yes. Okay, you want to browse. I want you to tell me what the want is. Okay, let's move on. Some people are not putting the wants and they are putting in the competitive supply. Okay, okay. Somebody is saying I want to drink tea. That's true. You can use Bonvita, Milo, yes, and they're in competition with each other. Okay, network, MTN, Airtel, Glo. So let's move on to the third one, which is composite supply. Now, with composite supply, that means that when a product can serve two or more purposes, that means that we have a commodity and you can put it into multiple uses. That's why we say it is composite. There is a commodity and you can serve multiple purposes. You can use it for a variety of things. And I've given you an example here, which is electricity. You can use electricity for so many things. You can use it for cooking. You can use it for lighting. You can use it for powering machines. You know, there's so many things you can use electricity for. So the same thing with coal. You can use coal for heating. You can also use coal for generating electricity. So what you're going to do here is you're going to mention the product and you're going to tell the multiple uses. Don't forget we are looking at multiple. So you should be able to come up with at least three things that we can use that commodity for. Okay, we have three things. Three things. Three things. Now, I'm not going to take two from you. Three. Wood for furniture, flooring, and yes. Timber, plank, sawdust, yes. Sugar, tea, gari, and cornflakes. Internet browsing, online classes, gaming. What's that? A smartphone, entertainment, for browsing, for games. That's true. Palm kernel for palm oil soap making, creams. Yes, that's also true. Palm tree, palm oil, palm wine. I didn't get that last one. Okay. So we have all those examples. Yes, these are different things that you can use. Okay. So that's what we have for um, types of supply. So keep the answers coming in. Keep the answers coming in. I want to go and bring in the next slide.
Maybe
You better stop that, whoever that is. So our next topic is going to be market equilibrium. This is our next topic, market equilibrium. That's what we want to talk about now. And so we are going to start by defining or describing what a market is. A market is a network of communications between individual and firms for the purpose of buying and selling goods and services. Network of communication between individuals and firms for the purpose of buying and selling goods and services. So that means that in a market, we have individuals and firms, which translates to the fact that we have buyers and sellers. The sellers are the firms and individuals are the buyers of goods and services. And so, like we said, it's a network of communication. They interact. Buyers and sellers interact with each other in the market. And you know that's typically what happens in the market. You go to the market, there's a thing you want to buy, you go to the seller, you are the buyer, and then an interaction takes place between you and the buyer. How much do you sell this? It is 50,000. And then you begin to interact. I want to pay 30,000. No, it is 40,000. So that interaction takes place until at the end of the day, a price is agreed upon. And once a price is agreed upon, you are at liberty to either buy or not to buy. But once you buy, that means that transaction has been sealed and it has been completed. There are two broad types of markets that we can talk about in economics. The first one is the product market. And just like the name implied, products, it is a market for products that are ready. That is finished goods and services that are ready for buying. That's what is called. That's what happens in the product market. So the product market is our ordinary market, the everyday market that we visit, where we buy our goods and services that are ready for consumption. So the major buyers in the product market are households. They are household, and household is defined as a group of people living together and eating from the same pot. That's the definition of an household, living together and eating from the same pot. So households are the major buyers, the consumers. They go to that market and they buy goods and services. Now that's the product market. We now have the second market, which is the resource market. It can also be called the factor market. And the factor here is talking about the factors of production. It's looking at the factors of production. And we're looking at the market where factors of production are bought and sold. Of course, we already know what the factors of production are: land, labor, capital, entrepreneur. Each one of these has their own market. Buy land. You buy, an example is labor. You buy labor services are procured, and in the labor market, we have an interaction between workers and employees. That is employers, workers and employers. That is employers and employees. They also interact. You apply for an employment, you go for interview, you interact. How much do you want to pay me, or how much am I going to be paid, or this is how much we want to pay you, and then you continue to interact. I'm not comfortable with the price. Let's take it higher. No, let's take it lower until a consensus is reached. And the same thing happens in the capital markets. You need money, you go to the capital markets, and then they tell you the rate of interest. In some cases, you can negotiate. In some cases, the rate of interest is fixed. And so you determine whether you are interested or not. So the interaction also goes like that in the capital markets. So we have the product market and we have the factor market. And in all of this interaction, what comes to play is actually demand and supply. That is what entails. When you look at it holistically, people demand for products and producers supply the products, and they interact, and eventually they agree at a price. There's a consensus at a price. And if there's no consensus, that means they don't buy, or transaction does not take place. But in most cases, where there is a consensus, then transaction takes place. And so that's basically because demand and supply, consumers and the producers have been able to interact with each other and reach a consensus. So we go to price. Price is that consensus that they will arrive at. That means that those who want to buy has agreed at that price in agreement with those who want to sell. So we say that price is the value of goods and services, because it is price that determines what is the value of a commodity. And so it's expected that goods that are of higher quality would demand higher prices than goods of lower quality. So it is the value you place on the good that determines how much you're willing to pay for it. So the value you place on it, either as a consumer or either as a producer, that determines how much you charge or how much you are ready to buy. So in a free market system, there's a difference. We are looking at the free market system. If it is not a free market, then it's a regulated market. And a regulated market, prices are fixed. But we are not concerned about those ones, a regulated market. We are looking at a free market. So in a free market, prices are determined by the forces of demand and supply. Prices are determined by the forces of demand and supply. So it's just what I have talked about, the interaction. So the interaction takes place, and the price system involves all that takes place on how price is fixed. It depends on what has been produced, what has been distributed, what is available for exchange, the value the consumer places, on the commodity, the value the producer places. And so there's that interaction, and at the end of the day, there's a consensus and there's an agreement. And that is what is known as the price. So if we have established the various markets, and we have established what a market is, and so we have also established the fact that price is fixed at a point in time. So now let's now determine how is that price fixed. And it's not only price that is fixed, but quantity as well at the same time. You know that price also determines, as a consumer, price determines how much you can consume of a particular product, because, and the value you place on that product. You would, as a consumer, you will buy more if the price falls. As a supplier, price also determines how much you supply. You would want to supply more as a producer if price increases. So having that in mind, how then is equilibrium attained in the market? Now, equilibrium is attained when there is a balance between quantity demanded and quantity supplied at a specific time period. So we are looking at a balance between quantity demanded and quantity supplied. That automatically means that we're saying that at equilibrium, quantity demanded will be equal to quantity supplied. And once that happens, then the equilibrium price and quantity is determined at that point of consensus between consumers and producer. Producers, they are aiming at maximizing profits. That's why they always desire higher prices. And consumers are also aiming at maximizing utility. And that's why they also would desire lower prices. And so there's a tussle. When you argue prices, 10 naira, reduce it to 5 naira, take it higher. That interaction takes place until price is determined. And so essentially, when there is equilibrium, quantity, equilibrium, at equilibrium, equilibrium price and quantity are determined. So let's look at how this can be done graphically. So we do that. That means we are coming to the interaction between demand and supply. We've talked about demand and we've talked about supply. We've also talked about demand schedule and supply schedules. So here we're having a combination of both. We are looking at various prices. We are looking at quantity demanded, and we are looking at quantity supplied in thousands. So we can see that from the table. And if we just want to read a little bit, we'll see, if you just look at it, and see what I'm saying. You would see that when you look at quantity demanded, it follows the law of demand, that as price is falling, 4, 5, 6, 7, as price is falling, quantity demanded is falling, and as price is increasing, 4, 5, 6, that's the increase in price, quantity demanded is falling. Now, as price is falling, 10, 9, 8, 7, quantity demanded is, did I say that right? Okay, let me take it again. As price is falling, 4, 5, no, as price is increasing, 4, 5, 6, 7, down like that as it's increasing, you can see that quantity demanded is also, quantity demanded is falling as price is increasing. So you can see going 280, 240, 200 falling. But then if we take it on the other side, the price is falling. That is, we take it from 10, 9, 8, 7. You can see that quantity demanded is increasing, 40, 80, 120, 160. Now, if we look at the supply side, as price is increasing, 4, 5, 6, quantity supplied is also increasing, 40, 80, 120, 160. And as price is increasing, 10, 9, 8, 7, quantity supplied is also as price is increasing, quantity supplied, where are we? As price is increasing, 10, 9, 8. Okay, did I get that right? Okay, as price is falling, 4, 5, 6, quantity supplied is also falling. And as price is increasing, quantity supplied is also increasing. That 280 should not be 280, should be a smaller value. Is that last one that is creating problem? That 280 should not be 280. I think it should be 180. So we can adjust that. Okay. So let's move on. Graphical representation. Let's look at this is the tabular representation. Let's represent this on the graph. If we represent it on the graph, this is the graphical representation of the interaction between demand and supply. So we have the table plotted on a graph. And from the graph, if you look at that graph very well, we have the demand plotted, which shows the demand curve sloping downwards from left to right. And we also have the quantity supplied plotted, which shows the supply curve sloping upwards. Price is represented on the vertical axis, and quantity is represented on the horizontal axis. So you have your price there being represented, and you have the quantity demanded and supply. So the price there is P, that's the equilibrium price, and the QE is equilibrium quantity. Now, what are we saying here? You can see that the price and the equilibrium quantity is determined at the point of intersection between demand and supply. That's when there's a consensus and there's an agreement on price. So at that point of intersection, you can see that from the graph. If you draw it to the price line, you have PE, which is the equilibrium price. And if you draw it to the quantity axis, you have quantity, which implies the equilibrium quantity. Now, when you look at that table very well, you will discover that at any point in time, okay, we have what is called excess supply and excess demand. Let me go back to that table, and then we come and explain that better. Excess supply and excess demand. Now, if you look at this table, the equilibrium price, I think I should ask you that. What is the equilibrium price here? Look at the table and tell me the equilibrium price. 7, that is true. The equilibrium price is 7. So at that equilibrium price, you can see that quantity demanded is 160,000, quantity supplied is 160,000. So you can see the equality between the quantity demanded and quantity supplied. Now, if we move further, you will now notice that at any price above the equilibrium price. Now let's look at those prices that are above equilibrium price. That is prices 8, 9, 10. Watch the table with me. Prices 8, 9, 10. What did you see? Which is greater? Quantity demanded or quantity supplied? Quantity demanded or quantity supplied? Which is greater? Yes, quantity supplied. That's true. Thank you for those answers. Quantity supply is greater. And then at prices below 7, which is greater? At prices below 7, that is 654, which is greater? Yes, quantity demanded. Thank you. So we now go back to our graph. So we know from what we have just done now that at any price above equilibrium price, quantity supplied is always greater than quantity demanded. That's why we say that there is excess supply. You can see that from the graph. And at any point below the equilibrium price, there would always be excess demand because quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied. So we've been able to establish the fact that equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity can be determined at the point of intersection between demand and supply. Now we've seen this graphically. Let's calculate this. Let's do a mathematical representation of this. So how do we calculate equilibrium price and quantity? Now, in order to be able to do that, we need two functions. We need two equations. We need the demand function and we need the supply function. And that is what has been given as a question here. It says, giving a demand function, the demand function is 10 minus P, and we have a supply function, which is 20 minus 5P. And it says, calculate the equilibrium price and quantity. Note, quantity is expressed in thousands. So we have to calculate equilibrium price and quantity. So the first thing we do here is at equilibrium, determine at equilibrium what happens. We already know that at equilibrium, the quantity demanded equals quantity supply. So that's what we set up. At equilibrium, demand will be equal to supply. And it's minus 20, yes. Demand will be equal to supply. So if that is the case, all we need to do is go to demand and equate it with supply. So if we do that, demand is 10 minus P. So it becomes 10 minus P is equal to supply, which is minus 20 plus 5P. So once we equate them together, of course, you know the next thing to do is to collect like terms. So we do that. So the P's come to one side and the numbers go to the other side. So we have 5P plus P is equal to 10 plus 20. And that gives us 5P plus P will give us 6P, and 10 plus 20 will give us 30. Of course, we are looking for P, which is price. And so the price is 30 divided by 6, which will give us 5. So price is 5 naira. And don't forget, if you ask to calculate this in exam, you must put the naira sign. If you do not put the naira sign, it is not price. And that means you get that wrong. So now that we have been able to establish that the price is 5 naira, now we need to determine the quantity supplied or demanded, because the equilibrium quantity is actually the same. At equilibrium, quantity demanded is equal to quantity supplied. So whatever we use, we can use the demand function, we can use the supply function. I am using the demand function here, but you can go and use I'm using the supply function. You can go and use the demand function, you will still get the same answer. So let's use the supply function, and the supply function is minus 20 plus 5P. Since we already know that price is 5, so we substitute 5 as P. So that means that minus 20 plus 5 into 5. That gives us minus 20 plus 25, which is 5 times 5. So minus 20 plus 25 also gives us 5. But don't forget that we have said notes that quantity is expressed in thousands. So that means that the equilibrium quantity is 5,000. That's the implication. So that means that equilibrium quantity is 5,000. Now, I'm going to ask you to do this exercise. Now there's an exercise there. You are expected to calculate the equilibrium price and quantity. I await your answers when you are through. Calculate the equilibrium price and quantity. There's an exercise showing on the screen. So I want you to calculate the equilibrium price and quantity. People are already giving me answers, 10 and 15. Another person is saying 7. equilibrium price and quantity. Okay. I'm waiting. No. Price is 7, quantity is 18. I think I think we have a consensus answer now. Price is 7, quantity is 18. Okay. Price is 7, quantity is 18. Okay. That's good. So we can now take questions. So we can take questions today. I'm coming. And then again, I think we can also, okay, maybe I can even ask you people to, let me see. Okay, let me go to the chat box and see. I'm coming. I think I saw a question here. I'm coming. Is quantity, where is it? I'm coming. Is quantity and demand schedules the same as PPC? No, it's not. Let me look. Is there any? Is it in every case that quantity is expressed in thousands? No. Quantity can be expressed in millions. It can be expressed in trillions. It can be expressed anywhere. But the question will tell you. And so that will determine what your units will be. Oh, I keep forgetting. I'll send the course outline to you. I'm answering your question, so that's what I'm doing. No, complementary supply is not composite supply. Complementary supply can also be known as joint supply, which is different from composite supply. Then can it be expressed in units? Yes, it can be expressed in units. But then it depends on if it's thousand or millions, and then you can go on like that. It can be expressed in units. I've told you what the answers are. 7 price and 18 for quantity demanded or supplied. So I don't know what I'm answering again. That's the answer. That's the answer to the question to the exercise that I asked you to do. Those people writing their names, they are coming faster than your questions. That's why. No, you'll be told when you are going to have a continuous assessment. You are all going to hear about that. Don't be in a hurry. It will come. It will definitely come before. It will definitely come before exam time. Yes, I'm going to send the slides. I've always been sending the slides, so don't worry about that. No, it is not compulsory that prices are expressed in Naira. It could be in any other currency, but in most cases we use Naira because that is our currency and we're in Nigeria. That's why. But it could be expressed in any currency whatsoever. Forget about a physical class. I doubt if you people would have a physical class, because I doubt if there is any class in University of Lagos that will be able to accommodate your population. So your population is quite high, and those venues that can accommodate you do not have a board, no board that can be used. So it's going to make teaching very difficult, you know. So I doubt if you would have a physical class. I don't think so. People are repeating questions. I've already said that you're going to have a continuous assessment, but I cannot specifically say why. But you'll be given ample time. You'll be told when. There are three of us teaching, and we need to agree on a date for the test. So I don't know when. I don't know when. Now, may I also tell you that today will be my last lecture with you. From next week, um, the last lecturer will start with you, and that is then Dr. Baluga. So you can communicate with Dr. Baluga. Your governor can communicate with Dr. Baluga, and he will start teaching you, and he will be the last one to teach, and so he will teach you through to the time when you would have exams. But you can be sure that when the test is going to take place, we'll try and inform you on time. Hmm? So it's been lovely taking you in this class. I've really enjoyed the class. It's been very interactive, and you have um, been able to contribute very well in the class. I hope that in my own little way, I've been able to make an impact um, in your life, and I hope that because I know many of you are not even economic students, so possibly our paths might not cross again. But for economic students, I know that we will still get to meet ourselves in the future. So I wish you all the best in Unilag. You have just started, and I know that you will end well in the mighty name of Jesus. I wish you all the best. Take care of yourselves. And I'm showing my face so that when you see me, on the way, you greet me. Hmm? You greet me, and you can introduce yourself. Take care. God bless you.
Thank you, man.
Thank you
Thank you,
too.
man. Thank you,
Thank
man.
you too.
Thank you, man.
Really
Thank you,
enjoy
man.
the class, man.
Thank you, ma.
Thank you,
ma.
man.
Thank you, ma. I really
Thank
enjoyed the
thank you,
class,
man.
ma. It was
The
very
class was very
Enjoy
interactive.
your
interactive.
class,
Thank you,
man.
man.
Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
And
It was really interactive. Thank you so much, man.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you so
ma.
much, man. We are really enjoying and understanding your class, man.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ma.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, ma. Thank you very much, ma.
Thank you very much, man. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, ma.
Sure, go balance your call.
She don't.